Yeah. All right. Good morning, everyone. It is week 3 with me and Katie here with our series this month on parenting with purpose, how to really support your kids throughout the year. And today, what we're going to talk about is how to make that connection, how to really make that connection with your kids. So, Katie, I'm going to pass it off to you.
All right. Well, good morning for those of us just joining you this week. My name is Catherine Price, and I am a licensed clinical mental health counselor and a licensed clinical addiction specialist. I am an outpatient therapist and the owner of Padma Counseling and Consciousness, which is a mental health private practice covering all of North Carolina virtually. All
like
right.
literally and virtually, right? Like literally and virtually.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
All right.
so I know that for myself, not just with my kids, but even with my grandkids, sometimes finding that thing that you have in common, finding that commonality with your kids, it is a struggle. And I think after COVID and even the more pervasive technology has become, they just communicate in a different way. They're used to communicating in syllables versus sentences.
Right.
So like it's a different way to communicate, and bridging that gap can be a challenge. So where do we start?
Well, I wanted to bring up the concept with responsive parenting.
Okay.
And that really is just being kind of observing your child. We call it attunement. So that's basically being kind of tying into some of our previous sessions with what we talked about, the concept of mindfulness, which is just being aware of yourself and the external environment. And we can translate as a parent to the child being aware of your own emotional states as well as the child's emotional states, and being responsive to that in a constructive way for things.
So I mean, so I was just going to ask a question. I know for myself, those of you who've read my book or know my story know that I was disowned when I was pregnant with my older son. So my experience with my parents has dictated, like, for a long time, my relationship with my kids. So I know that I've had to unlearn some things just based on my experience. So for me, it was being able to find that was pretty, I wouldn't say easy, but it was very apparent, especially as my kids got older and they started having the relationships with what became their significant others and seeing other family types and the other way families interact, made me realize, that's kind of a bit of a deficit for me, right? Like, I just didn't know, or I didn't learn, or like my experience with families was that it's very transactional.
Yes.
Like I was like, you do what I say, then I love you. You don't do what I say, then we throw you away and you don't matter. So like that has been my experience. So like that I found was the first obstacle for me, because in like with me being disowned because I was pregnant, when I was like the first probably 6 or 7 years with my son James, I thought I was communicating to him how much I loved him, and he was hearing he was the reason that I don't talk to my parents. And so so like how do we recognize or see those things about ourselves so that we can learn, like know where to start learning, I guess is my question. I know that's a tough one this early in the morning, Katie. Woo was kind of heavy. I know it's heavy, but sometimes as parents, we just don't realize it. It's not our fault that we don't know. Like that's really, it's not my fault that I didn't know how to do that or foster that, because I never was taught that. I observed something different from my parents. So, that's a lot of the reason that I've embarked on what I've done, is because I needed to do and be something different than what I experienced. But so like I'm throwing you in the deep end this morning with that.
That's okay. Yes, all very good questions to ask. And thank you for sharing such a vulnerable part of your story with us. I think, and we've talked about this concept too in our past couple of meetings together, is just approaching things with openness and self-compassion for yourself, because it doesn't do any good, especially as a parent, to beat yourself up when you make mistakes. That just keeps you further in this cycle of shame and guilt, right? Adding to everything else. And what does shame and guilt do? It keeps you down. It doesn't motivate you to, like, sure, it can be a motivator, but is that going to be a sustainable motivator for you to continue to show up consistently? Most likely not. And I think, so definitely compassion, but also just being open to, like, hearing outside perspectives. And shameless plug for having a therapist. I think I always say that's the best thing that you can do as a parent, is to start working on some of your own things, being open to things. I see a lot of parents that are resistant initially at first to that. And I think it's because it can hurt our ego. Well, what's wrong with me? Like, there's nothing wrong with you. That's just the family patterns that have been passed down, over generations. And that's simply what I would call it, just learned behavior and patterns. And until we can see or get outside help to help us see those patterns, it's kind of hard to break those things on your own.
Yeah, I think it's like something like we talked about with the kids. We make it our identity.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so there's like the shame and guilt part for sure, because that's what my parents made me feel like I was the most horrible daughter person on the planet, and having to, like, say, no, I'm not that. I am not that thing. Okay. All right. Yeah. So that's a first place that I had to start, was acknowledging that and looking for something different.
Right.
For something different. But I want to address what I think most people think, right? When they say, yeah, I would love to have a therapist, but I can't afford a therapist. Right. Because I think because of COVID and just some other things in the world, that's more accessible and more acceptable than it used to be. So, like, can you talk about that just for a second? Because I don't want to gloss over that. Like, someone saying, like, that would be great, but I can never afford that. Like, they've already ruled it out before they know more facts. So what does that look like?
Yeah, well, that's a very real concern in the mental health just field of everything, because a lot of people can't, and just because the flaws of our healthcare system and how it's set up. I won't get too political with that, but I will say, I would advise against it's basically doing, I know there's advertisements for like betterhelp.com and other stuff like that, which is, a therapist available 24/7. Yes, you can go that route with the commercial therapists per se, but I recommend against that. There's actually a lawsuit brought against BetterHelp for stealing clients' data and actually posting some of their private therapy notes onto Facebook and other places as testimonials. So, which breaks all kinds of confidentiality, because in therapy, that's one of our main core ethics, is everything is confidential. That's basically the therapeutic relationship. So advise against that, those kind of quick commercialized things. There are better ways to go about it. Most therapists offer what we call sliding scale fees for clients. And it's just a way to give back to the community. And it's kind of a pay as you go, or some people do it based on income. So whether that's you're paid hourly, they might say, okay, well, if you earn $13 an hour, that's going to be how much your session will cost. So $13 per session, or, sometimes they'll ask for a W-2. Okay, well, let's break it down. What seems reasonable to you? So most therapists have slots like that. So ask for that when you're looking around for people. A lot of therapists will also do out of network. So even if they don't take your insurance and you have some other kind of insurance, they will help provide a super bill, and you can submit that to your insurance to help pay for that. I'll also make a plug for Open Path. They have, it's kind of a network of therapists just giving back, kind of a easy directory to search by specialization, location, things like that. And they're pretty reasonable rates for people as well.
So just don't give up on it. Just
Yes.
there are options out there besides just the traditional, you submit it to your insurance way.
Yes, and I absolutely am open to anyone sending me a message. I'm very open to sending you back resources, or directing people where I can.
All right, good. Yeah, okay. All right. So now that we talked about that,
Yes.
it's easy to get that out, for sure. All right. So then how do we talked about looking at our habits and looking at
Mhm.
helping us first. And then how do we, as we're observing, what are the things that we're looking for to make that connection? I know with the martial arts school, it's just finding we have something in common, right? Even with the parents, but with the kids, finding the reason that they want to be there. I have to do a lot. And so I ask a lot of questions when I'm working with new students, asking a lot of
Mhm.
questions to get an understanding of them and what they're looking for. So what are some other things that parents can do when they're looking for that connection?
Mm, that's a good question too. And I would definitely emphasize that too, is asking a lot of questions. Like we said, being open to new experiences. I think this I'm not going to discount it as being very hard too, especially when, if you're like, wow, okay, I'm recognizing, if you're listening to the talk and you're like, wow, I'm recognizing there's a lot of things that I might need to look at and step back. That's okay. Self-compassion, right? But I'd say get outside help too for whatever's going on. I'm going to reemphasize that, because every child is so unique to the situation, especially if there's behavioral problems involved. That is going to be especially challenging for things.
And especially if, like what we talked in previous weeks, if you didn't start this early, like if you haven't done these things, it's not too late.
Right.
It's never too late to start with your kids to make that connection. So don't think that it is. It's just going to be more of a challenge because now they've made decisions about you that may not be accurate, again, because of where you're coming from. So
right.
yeah, so it's not too late to start for sure.
Absolutely. And just some other kind of tips with that too. So not only asking questions and being open, but trying to find some similar interest with them. Children especially, and I was teenagers too, just in a different way, really bond through play. So whatever they are into, if they're into video games, if they're into, I don't know, on like scooter, playing outside, like just being with them and engaging somewhat. Not that you have to also ride the scooter outside, but just being with them.
I'm going to quote my friend Gina Goodman here: motion is lotion and stillness is illness. You need to go do it. Just give it a shot.
Right.
Wear protective gear if you know you might need that, but like getting moving. I think, and I also am a big proponent of that because I think when kids see you willing to look stupid or willing to do something that scares you or willing to like go the thing that they'll never thought that you would do, it opens a door for them being able to consider looking at your relationship differently if you're willing to do those things,
Right.
Yeah, so it's and it can lead to those great family stories. Like I shredded my knee trying to rollerblade because I grew up on roller skates, and so on roller skates the brakes in the front. On inline skating the brakes in the back, and I couldn't stop, and I was like literally like that guy, like whoa.
Oh god.
And so then I was like, I got straight for the grass. I went down on my knee and I skidded on my knee until I slowed down enough to stop. And of course, the loving, supportive family that I have, after they finished laughing so hard, they almost peed their pants. They came over to see if I was okay and to help me up. And so, but so now that's one of our stories because in retrospect, I'm sure it looked very funny.
Not in the moment, but
yeah, no, it was not. It was scary. It was very scary. I never got on rollerblades again either. I'm just going to say that. Not confident. To do that. but yeah, I think being willing to do that and being willing to, it makes it easier, in the meantime. But what if they're not athletic, and what if their favorite pastime is like reading, or like something that they can do alone? Then what do you recommend for that?
Yeah. Maybe that's something you can also engage into. If they're reading a book, also read the book with them. That way you can relate to the material. You can ask them questions, and kind of relate to some of their interests. It's a common topic to start kind of building.
Okay,
Um,
so this is the thing, and I know this is a thing. So parents, I'm going to talk about it because my grandson likes to do this. They like to watch things, people doing life and doing things on YouTube. And I
mhm.
personally feel like I get dumber, like the more I watch it, like it's just eating my brain. And so I tell them I can't do that. Like I'm not going to listen to it. But what if there's something like that? How do we, like, what if
Mm,
that's their thing? Like, and it's not just like the boy, my grandsons like to do Minecraft, or like to
mhm.
watch those Minecraft things. But I've had students who like to watch like Barbies and cooking. And I mean, I don't know, like it's just like, what if it's something like that? Should we not be authentic? I'm and just like go along with it, like try one and then not do it. Like, how do we handle that?
Mhm. Yes. I think, yeah, it might take a little bit of
Trial and
force
error.
in that, or determination, because we aren't gonna like everything that our kids like. So I think just being curious, you don't have to fake it and be like, wow, this is so interesting. But like, it's just okay, what are they doing here? Like, what do you find so interesting about
Okay.
this? Is this something like, and then maybe you start doing some of these things in real life if you're seeing them play with, plastic kitchen toys online. Okay, like maybe start trying to engage them in real life as you're cooking with them and see if that kind of can translate to real life too.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that was like my thing. I hate that.
Right. Yes, I think also definitely, well, this is what I've just noticed in my practice too, is that the more you engage and play with them, the more likely they're actually going to talk to you about more serious things like their feelings and what's going on. That's probably one of the most popular things for child therapists is to be trained on is play therapy, because that's how children kind of relate to the world. They have more of a stronger imagination than we do. I hate that we lose that as adults, but
We don't have
um,
to, right? We don't have to.
right.
That's a choice, or a mean, or however you want to call it, right? It's
Mhm.
just, I think too, that's the other benefit for the adults is, and anyone that works with kids, we get to see it in action all the time. And
Mhm.
so like when we're asking questions, some of their answers just like are really amazing. I used to have
Yeah.
a student that before they moved, Jacob, he was like 5. He would have questions, the best questions that made me like, either if I hadn't, and most of the time I had already anticipated, but most people never ask them. But sometimes I'd be like, Jacob, we
Yeah.
might need to reconsider this because of that question, and validating that. And so
Mhm.
that's like the side benefit besides the connection with your kids, and is like helping you tap into that place that we kind of push down because we feel like we have to, right?
Right.
Because we're adults and we have to be serious, so we can't do that and we can't do this, and
Right.
being able to like put on those different glasses, um it really does help you see things differently and get different perspectives for sure.
Absolutely. And it doesn't have to be, every single minute of every time they start playing, right? Because
Right,
we have things to do, right?
right.
We've got stuff to get done ourselves, but even they say even just 10 minutes a day, 10 minutes of intentional phone down, no other distractions, you're just playing with them and engaging is a start to things. And hopefully that expands your time with them and you start to make a deeper connection. But just 10 minutes I think is a good goal to start with, good realistic goal.
Okay. All right. All right. I like that. I like that. Can you see any so um I know that I have the pleasure of being a grandma. I'm Mimi. And I know with my grandsons, like watching the development from that perspective, it's a little different. And engaging is different because we don't get to see them all. Like we get to see them every other weekend and a few weeks in the summer every now and then. But I found that letting them help me with things that I don't necessarily need help with has created some different bonds and things for us. So that's been really fun. And saying yes when they ask me to do stuff. Like if if they say, hey, Mimi, do you want to do this? Even if I can't stop right then, I tell them, yes, I do. Let me get X, Y, and Z done, and then I will, has been kind of very helpful with building that rapport and that relationship with them too. Because it goes by so fast.
Yes.
So fast.
Yeah.
And the same is for the teenagers. So like these are just, it doesn't, this, like last week we talked about neuroscience, we talked about it in terms of age groups, but this is just across the board. So so this could also work for adults. Like if you're trying to build a connection with an adult, right? You can do the same thing, same methods. Maybe not engage play looks different, of course, but it totally happens, right? We just don't say, hey, would you like to engage in some play, right? But we do have social things that we do, which I just wanted to bring that point out because we're all human beings, right? And it's at some level we all have the same needs, right? Regardless of what it is. So like these can be applied to work environments too.
Yeah.
Right. Like work environments too. So that's just the other benefit, I think, of learning how to build connections. Part of me being disowned is what I had to do, because I was completely the only person that didn't completely disown me at that moment was my best friend Jennifer. And so I've always had that relationship with her, but for everything else I've had to rebuild those kind of bonds. And so it's become something I'm really good at doing because I had to do it. So that's why I wanted to bring that out, because it's something you can always get better at, and it's something you can always add to I always call them the tools in your toolbox, or the ingredients in your recipe.
Right.
Once you have that tool, it's something that you've got to practice with. So you can practice these things everywhere to get better with your kids, right? And then it gets better everywhere. And that's the thing. I think sometimes we compartmentalize things for situations that will work more broadly, and we could practice more often, because it's not always natural and easy if you haven't been that person and have to start it. Maybe you start it in a place where the result isn't so I don't want to say life or death, but isn't so important, right? So maybe you start it with a friendship, or maybe you start it with a working relationship, just to kind of practice getting that into your behavior. And then as you're working with your kids, it's a way to like go ahead and engage that creativity and relieve some pressure from you if you screw it up, because with anything new you're going to screw it up, right? It's a human being thing. Like we're not like always coming out the gate perfect. And so giving yourself, like we talked about earlier with the self-care and the emotional well-being, giving yourself the grace and the space to make those mistakes and not have to feel like the world's going to end as well. So that's important. Yeah. Any struggles that you know of where your clients have struggled with doing this, that you have like a troubleshooting plan for them, which I know we're going to talk about in week 5. So spoiler alert, I don't want to go like way into that, because that's what we're going to spend week 5 on, like troubleshooting your relationship with your kids. When it comes to just this specific topic, is there any framework, any like best practices that you can recommend?
Yes, I definitely do encounter this frequently. Because like we talked about, earlier in the conversation, is it's just patterns passed down generationally, and sometimes we're aware of them and we may not know how to get out of them, or an alternative to things, right? Or it's, I'm not aware of it until somebody brings that to my attention, that this is what's happening, or that this might not be a good practice to carry on as a parent. Best practices, without spoiling into week 5, it definitely is session dependent, like per client. Every client's different and their child's different. I think boundaries is a good way to start. When we talk about boundaries as adults, and it's a big buzzword, but boundaries are just, your limitations to things. And I think we talked about this in a previous talk too, just limitations, and what that looks like. So creating structure or creating routines for things. And I know some parents, especially if you had overly critical or what we call authoritarian parents, that's like my way or the highway, dictator kind of parents. Right. We're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be anything like that. And then we flip the script and we're like, anything goes, no rules, no guidance, right? But somewhere in the middle is what we call responsive parenting. It's somewhere in the middle where we can meet. I don't like the term gentle parenting, because I think that just implies that passivity kind of nature, like we're just uninvolved and everything's gentle and butterflies and unicorns, right? No, that's not how it is. It's mostly you just being responsive to what's happening with the child in a aware kind of way, responsive rather than reacting to, rather than I'm angry, so I'm going to do X, Y, and Z out of anger. It's okay, I'm angry. Let me take a step back and be able to, get across what I'm trying to illustrate for them, what set the boundaries or what the actual discipline is for things, instead of go to your room, blah, 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 yelling, things like that. Okay, what am I really trying to get across to them? This kind of behavior is not okay. We know this is a rule in our house. This is something we don't do. And now, because of that, this is what's going to happen. Okay.
All right. So into that. And then like one thing that worked with our family is we're a football family. And so my husband and I have always been Team Huff.
Yeah.
Right. So if we disagreed on anything, we never did it in front of our kids. So like if we disagreed, whoever started it, we back them. We back their play. We totally back their play. And then we would talk about it alone behind closed doors and how we wanted to handle it. But we found that, during different stages, I was the offensive line coach and Mr. Huff was the head coach for a really long time, like because of the way our kids reacted to what was going on. And then when they went to college, it was reversed. They would come to me all the time. And then he would be like the supplemental coach, only on specific things. But I think understanding where like your kids need you to be, instead of superimposing what you need to be to your kids. Because it hurt my feelings for a long time. I'm not going to lie. Hurt my feelings for a long time that it wasn't that way. But the minute I let go of that and I said, this is my job, is to raise decent human beings. Like, this is my job. And once I let go and like looked at it as, how can I support that goal? With my kids, that it became easier for us to go back and forth in the roles that we have. And so that's kind of our joke. We're like, all right, coach, head coach, what are you going to do? But kind of finding that style with your, whatever your family looks like too.
Yeah.
Right. We talked about this in previous sessions, that it looks differently. So if you've got, 2 moms, you've got 2 dads, or you've got like, stepmoms and stepdads, and then you've got grandparents involved, like whatever that works. If you guys can work as a team towards an ultimate goal. I think the one way in critical, no, what's that? Crucial Thinking
Mhm.
is a book. And the one thing that they talk about in there when you're talking about communication is keeping everyone like focused on what they all want to achieve. And everyone usually can agree what they want to achieve for the child.
Mhm.
Right. And so just taking it and putting it together so that you can all agree on that common goal for the kid. And then saying, okay, well, this is how I can support that. And
Mm.
us like pulling our egos out of the way and doing it like that has been really helpful for us. When we were raising our boys, it's less strife in your relationship
Right.
because like that's the how things are handled can become a thing. So there's less strife on that as well. So that's just my 2 cents, my unprofessional lived it 2 cents.
No, those are good points.
What's your 2 cents?
No, and I would agree with that too. You definitely need to be on the same page as parents or co-parents. And that doesn't always happen, but that's something to work towards, is being
Mhm.
on the same page and trying to align those values together. Which I know is hard with step parents, but trying to get, like you said, a common goal or common like values across, mutually together.
And I think it translates not in a more indirect way with your kids in that they see and feel that.
Mhm.
Like they see and feel the difference emotionally with that. And so it just brings everything down and less uh, to me it always felt like when we weren't on the same page, or we were like, it was all about like me getting time or us getting time or whatever it was.
Mhm.
It just felt different than when you just work towards, okay, well, as long as they're doing this, as long as everyone is showing them that they love them,
Yeah.
it's coming from a place of caring and not like anger or frustration, and not necessarily at the kids but just with the situation. I
Mhm.
found that it released, allowed different things to happen. It just allowed different things to happen and it was more enjoyable.
Right.
Right, like you didn't go, "Ah," you're like, oh yeah. It just kind of sets the tone in a different way, and that translates to the kids in a different way.
Mhm.
It translates to them and they pick up on that too, because they're sponges emotionally, and then they're taking it all in either way. And again, we get to enjoy the process. We should anyway. We should.
Yes. We don't always, and there's definitely moments where you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, like
Yeah.
this is a lot to handle. But I heard this term recently, the psychological term of glimmers, right? So we think about triggers as those certain events that really set us off or make us angry, or
Mhm.
maybe it reminds you about a past circumstance.
Yeah.
Especially with a history of trauma, triggers are a big thing. But glimmers is kind of the opposite. It's like finding those little moments of happiness or joy in things. Um, and I think the more we try to attune ourselves to that and look for those, um, the more helpful that's going to be overall.
Mm. All right, so this is kind of a short one today because it's a trial and error thing. You're just gonna have to
Mhm.
I think that's the key is don't stop trying.
Right.
Don't
Mm.
stop trying to do what you're doing. And even if it didn't work one day, it might work the next.
Right.
Or if it didn't work in this situation, it might work in the next situation. So
Mhm.
don't stop trying to have that. Again, it goes to their level. Sometimes they don't believe the first few attempts, right? Especially if it's new, especially if it's, you with a stepchild or you with what they don't trust that it's authentic. They don't trust that it's real. So sometimes you're having to make some deposits in that bank first before
Mhm.
the other things will come through.
Right, which is kind of the last key point that I want to illustrate, is how to build trust in the relationship. Especially if, like you said, you're that person that's, oh my gosh, I'm listening to this and I'm realizing there's some things that I might need to change. It's never too late to start the repair work. Like
Mhm.
I've said from the first talk, like that's the most important thing, is the repair work. Is you can always repair, even if into adulthood and you're like, oh my gosh, there's some things that I probably need to look at. Like, it's never too late to apologize, and starting to try and build that trust back.
Mhm.
And how we build that trust is first trying to keep your promises. So I know sometimes we might make those little white lies to kids, but I would avoid even trying to do that with them. Keeping your promises and staying as consistent as possible with that is a huge one, because that translates into adulthood. You are the safe space and the model for them. So you're really a relationship that they are going to take further into adulthood. So the more that you can create that safe space, the more that they feel like they can approach other relationships open and vulnerable, in a good way, vulnerable.
Right.
So I would also, kind of the second point with that is just, again, being honest, where age appropriate, right? Like, certain things we don't need to tell them all the adult details of things, but being honest, like, mommy's really tired today. We're not gonna go to the playground like we usually do. We're gonna do something inside instead of, oh gosh, the playground's closed today. Like, I don't really want to go. It's like, mommy's just tired. We're gonna have to do something different, and they might not like that. That's okay. You're gonna disappoint them, but being honest is better than telling lies, right? It goes back to keeping your promises and being authentic, which is something we're going to talk about too in terms of content, is being your authentic self and how to cultivate that individually. And lastly is just validating their experience. So I think we talked about this in previous talks too. All of this blends together, y'all.
But it's good to talk about it though too, because its application is different in different situations. Like the concept is across the board, but again, I think where I'm going to point my fingers at me, struggle is an application of this concept to the different situations. So, all right, and then you were talking about the validating.
Yes, so validating their experience, even if it sounds so silly, like, oh my gosh, you're thinking, why are they crying right now? Like, this is not a big deal. It's okay. I can see you're upset with whatever the situation is, and that's okay. Or you're upset that we can't go to the playground. Understandable. I'm going to let you have your moment, and I'm going to be here whenever you're, can calm down, or want to talk about that, depending on what age they're in, right? Or they might want their space for things, and then be able to be there when they can calm down too, as we are modeling those ways for them.
And I think with the older kids, like, if you don't understand their behavior, I think just like going back to being honest, like, I don't understand why this upsets you so much. Like, I'm not seeing what you're seeing, so can you explain it to me? And then that's a little bit harder, because again, the method of communication, text messaging, like, they don't speak in sentences, they speak in phrases and emojis, and right. You can't like ask a teenager, hey, what emoji are you feeling right now? They're gonna be like, crazy. But yeah, so being able to just tell them, I don't understand, like, especially if you're really confused, don't belittle that like, I don't even know why that upsets you. I mean, it upsets them. So just tell them you don't understand why it's upsetting you. It puts it in a completely different light when you say, help me understand.
Right. One is invalidating, one is validating. And the invalidation being like the first phrase that you used.
So we just want to make sure that we can be authentic to like our confusion or our frustration, right? We can be authentic to that, but just phrasing it in a way that gives them a way to examine it so that they can explain it. Right. So like they can explain what it is. And if they can't explain it, giving them the space to like think about it.
Right.
Demanding that answer, like, right now, I need to know. Like, just saying, I can't help you with this until I understand why it's making you so angry or making you so frustrated or making you so whatever that emotion is.
Right.
I just don't think, and like they think it goes back to what we talked about, in week one about emotional well-being is
Mhm.
like working not just with your kids, but with yourself on naming how you're feeling.
Right.
Because we have to name how we're feeling so we can understand the why of what we're feeling.
Mhm.
I think I mean, I know I was never taught that. I was never taught to talk about how I was feeling in the moment. And of course, like, obviously my parents disowned me. We're not a touchy-feely family, obviously,
Mm.
right? Like I wasn't raised that way, but I was also like, I was the middle, like there's I have three sisters and a brother. So there was five of us. My mom had a lot on her plate. Got it. But I was taught as being the middle child that, to push things down or what I felt
Mm.
didn't matter, that I was going to have to do it anyway. So I've kind of adopted that mentality that I constantly have to relearn, especially with my kids and their extended families, because I'm not a natural person who asks for help.
Mm.
Right. I'm not naturally asking for help. So like that is something I personally struggle with. I'm just going to do it because that's what I was taught, right? Like
Yeah.
all those years, just do it, So and when you start analyzing that behavior, you'll see all of the places it shows up to you and what it creates for you as a person. Like you're like, wow, like that one thing is why this always happens to me, and that one thing is why this always happens to me,
Mhm.
because like then you start to see a pattern. But I think making sure that we're naming how we're feeling is so key. It's so key. And then feeling that feeling, and
Right.
even with
Giving
me as
yourself permission.
yeah, like even as a
Mhm.
parent, like if your kids make you angry, feel that feeling,
Right.
right? Because why it's making you angry, that could be the thing that opens you up to like something that you're not seeing about yourself, that you can then come back to them and say, when you did that, it made me really angry, but I realized that I wasn't angry about you, I was angry about this. Like
Mm.
again, we're going back to the modeling, but we're also opening that up so that they can see how to do it. And we're
Mm.
just we're building better people.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is such a good point. I'm so glad that you mentioned that. Took the words right out of my mouth.
So yeah, so that's really where it is. So it's trial and error. Just don't stop trying. And you've got the confidence complex. If you're in our area in Fayetteville, North
Yes.
Carolina, you can always come there and work out some aggressions. 4:30 every day. We've got open mat, things to hit, things to throw. Like we're there for you, right? Or you can call Katie, reach out to her.
Mhm.
But you've got options and choices and communities that you can tap into to help you with this too. Like there's women's groups, there's Facebook groups, there's local groups that meet in your area. I know that they are, right? Because
Mhm.
there's a lot of people that struggle with the same thing. We just don't talk about the struggle.
Right.
We talk about the wins. We don't want to talk about the struggle. But it takes somebody else outside of your situation sometimes to look and help you have those aha moments.
Mhm.
Because it's said a few different ways. Like Kim Walsh Phillips says it, like you can't read the label from the bottle from the inside.
Mhm.
Sometimes you have to have someone on the outside do it for you and help you find those Captain Obvious moments, like, oh, what? I didn't realize it was
Right.
just that. Yeah. So anything you want to wrap up with, Katie?
Gosh, I think we covered everything. We said it, we kind of sped through today.
Well, today, like, it's gonna be different. It's
Yeah.
gonna be different age. You're just gonna have to try, right? And you're gonna have to be, and you're gonna have to fail and do all of the things that nobody wants to do, right?
Right.
You're gonna have to persevere. And the cool thing is this, is that as it's something like once you develop it, then when your kids get old enough to have, wives or other relationships, and then they have extended families, you have a whole set of resources to apply to those new situations. So it's still with your kids, but now you get to do it in all these other places that will help. And again, make the whole process enjoyable.
Mhm.
Like that's the key, making the process enjoyable.
Yes,
So
absolutely. Finding those glimmers.
yeah, I like that. I'm gonna be a glimmer. I'm gonna name something like that. Glimmer. Like I was in a training the other day, and you probably don't know this. And those of you who do know this, please comment, because I talked about romper room, and the people in the room did not, like, there was maybe 3 of us who knew what romper room was. So Katie, I'm thinking you don't know what romper room is.
No idea.
Find it. So Romper Room was a show that used to come on PBS, and it was for the pre-K, and she would always, like, the kids would gather around her, and she'd have her mirror, and she would be like, I see Tommy and Brittany, and like she would just talk like that. So when we're ever in a Zoom meeting and people are greeting people, I'm like, it feels like Romper Room to me. Hi, Katie. And they had no clue, right? No clue. It's like, okay, all right. So now maybe we just need to come up with like a new like the glimmer stick or something to help people. Like, I think I'm gonna create that, Katie, for real. So
I love it.
if you're in like one of my workshops or one of my events, or you're one of my martial arts students, I think I'm gonna make a glitter stick and
I
say,
love it.
what was your glimmer moment today?
Right.
I think I'm probably gonna do that. I think I have like an old Eskrima I can like cut in half and make the glimmer stick and introduce it.
Absolutely.
Right.
I'm
And
all for it.
yeah, and we talk about it all the time, and like finding the good. What
Mhm.
was good about today? What was good? Like focusing on the good emotions of the day. Right. So yeah, glimmer stick, here you go. I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna bring it on here for next week.
Yes.
All right. On that note, go try and make some new connections, not just with your kids, with yourself, with your
Mhm.
workers, with your friends, and let's go be better people. Let's go be better people, and we'll see you next week. What's next week's topic, Katie?
Next week, I believe we are talking about, emotional intelligence, temperament, things like that. We got a lot of information to cover next session, so it's going to be a good one.
Yeah, so next session, get all in, and we will see you guys soon. Have
Okay.
a great day. Yeah, I think this topic, it is more trial and error,
Mhm.
but I like it. I like it.
Are you still live streaming?
No,
Okay.
I stopped us.
Okay.
I stopped the recording too.